Welcome to the 10 myths that block special education systems change. This is number 5, the low expectations myth. And I'm really excited about the guest I have today, Rick Miller. Uh, I met you just a month ago
hmm
about at when you were doing your keynote at the Delaware Leadership Conference, and I heard you talking about Hope Science, and I went, "What? I've never heard about Hope Science." Tell people about whatever you want to tell us about your background, how you got started in this. It's amazing. It's launched me on a whole new thing. But tell us about you.
and how did I become involved and committed to further understanding Hope Science and then using it as a navigation tool for people's lives, right? And how consequential it could be if they understood the elements of it and used it to again guide their journeys in life. But I got started when I was 16 years old, trying to understand why some kids do well and other kids struggle. Now I'm a 16-year-old. I'm a sophomore in high school. I love school. I love the extracurricular activities. I love my friends. I love my teachers. I love everything about school and where I am on life's journey. And then I noticed a number of my friends aren't attending school any longer. Now I grew up in a lower income Mexican American community in Southern California. But as a kid, I didn't understand economics and people worked and people needed to survive. And a number of my friends who I later discovered were from families that were struggling economically. And so they had to leave school to support their families. And I was just struck by that. But at that point in time in my thinking, it just occurred to me that maybe they weren't in school because nobody cared whether they were in school or not. That the machinery of the school had to operate, and because we had so many students, it didn't matter if one or two, dropped out, or three or four dropped out. Now that's my thinking as a 16-year-old. It's changed, obviously. I hope I'm a little bit more sophisticated in that understanding, but it occurred to me that maybe no one just cared whether these kids were in school or not. And I decided at that moment in time, like a thunderbolt struck me, I decided at that moment in time that I would be that guy in kids' lives. I would be that person who cares about kids that maybe others forget about because they're busy in their life. They're busy being busy. And that was the moment that I decided what path in life I was going to take. And I haven't varied from that path in 60 years, right? In one way, shape, or another, I've stayed on that path, doing what I said I was going to do as a 16-year-old, care about kids that other people may have forgotten about because they're just busy being busy in their lives.
I can't believe how much that's a parallel from my initial story. I'm just going to really quickly tell it like in one sentence. In 1970, I was a first year teacher, and I asked my department chair, "What do I do about those kids that are really struggling? I have a couple kids in my seventh grade English class that can't read." And he said, "Some kids just won't learn. Don't worry about it." And I decided, oh, yeah, I was going to worry about it and I was going to do something about it. And here I am 56 years later. So I'm
Yep,
catching up with you. But
yep.
it's the same. It's like, isn't that interesting that the parallel that we both made a decision? I think there are a lot of teachers that become teachers, and there are a lot of people who work with young people who have that kind of a commitment, a lifelong,
Mhm.
I got to figure this out. And that's what my whole Substack channel is for, people like that. So
Yeah, and I think instinctively or intuitively, we understood that as young professionals, in my case, as a young student, but then ultimately a professional, that our beliefs in kids makes all the difference in the world. And conventional wisdom has kind of given us an excuse as to why some kids do well and other kids struggle. And the excuse that we came up with, and this was became kind of conventional wisdom beginning in the 1980s, but really well before it. It was the 1980s when the United States Department of Education actually published a study that they called A Nation at Risk. And for the first time, we began to use the word at risk as a deficit to where we should be as an individual, as a family, as a country. because these things were bombarding us with negativity. And so we were at risk. And then we just applied that at risk label to children. If children came from poverty, if children came from dysfunctional families, if they were new immigrants to the country, didn't speak the language well, if their parents didn't graduate or attend school through high school, if they were chronically unemployed.
And if they have a disability,
Well,
then they're at risk too.
and that's where we converge. That's where you and
Yeah.
I intersect, because that broadens even my understanding of what an at-risk student is and how broadly we apply that label to children, basically to say to ourselves, because I think it's the classic excuse, basically to say to ourselves, what do you expect me to do? These kids come with these disabilities, they come with these economic challenges, they come from dysfunctional families, they're abused, they experience trauma in one shape, form, or another, and I'm supposed to work with them? And the answer is absolutely, because they're still kids. They're still kids.
And there are two parts to that, Rick. There's the part that, how can I do this? It's really not my fault that they come with all these at risk. But on the other hand, I am a crusader working for these kids that I don't believe will really succeed. And so a teacher has the identity of, I'm going to be the heroic person working with them in the culture of, but of course we know they're not going to really make it. And so
Mhm.
it's like we've set ourselves up to fail if we did that.
And the reason for that, Amy, that I've come to conclude, and I'm trying to learn like everybody else every single day. I'm trying to grow and understand these dynamics and apply them to everyday life and see what we can do to make things better for everyone. But I think the reason we do that is conventional wisdom has given us the answer that we don't have to think about. Why do some kids do well and other kids struggle? And the reason some kids do well is that they have assets in their favor. They have good families, they go to good schools, they live in safe neighborhoods. There's the economics are well, and the kids who struggle from dysfunctional families or disabilities or certain mental health issues or what have you. And that doesn't say I'm not going to work with those kids, but it does say I may not believe that these kids are capable of success. I'll still go through it. They deserve my attention. I will do the best I can. But at the end of the day, I think there's just so many things going against these young people that I really can't believe that they're going to find a satisfying, flourishing life for themselves. And that's where we establish the barrier from going to the future and always living in the past, because the past is easy to identify because we've lived it. And we use that identification to apply it to the future. If these kids haven't succeeded in the past, then their chances of succeeding in the future has been minimized. And that's where we come in saying, no, don't judge the future based on the past. Create the future you want to see these kids live in. And that's the way change has always taken place.
And I love that when you first started talking about the hope science and giving us the components of it, and I started thinking about what is the hope? For how many years have I been teaching special ed at a university, providing consulting to schools, doing keynotes and speaking engagements and workshops where I talk about here's the strategy we're going to learn, but not here is the world we're going to create. What is our vision of what is really possible? There is so much research about what you can do if a kid has this disability or that disability. Cognitive science has come so far, and teachers learn it, but it's still within that box of, but we know these kids have low expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm ready to burst that open with. So the solution is teachers say, oh, yes, these are great strategies. They would work in most classrooms, but you don't know my kids. Then we have this whole, let's take another look. Let's take another look at what if it is possible? What would this world look like? What would school look like? What would your classroom look like? What would it look like for one of your students who has a disability or comes from an impoverished background, what would it look like for the typical peers to actually accept everybody's differences? Because actually, there's a lot of variability between all of us anyway.
Mhm.
So you took this into the prison system, into the incarcerated youth. Tell us how that went.
Well, the obvious reason for my interest in working with kids in detention or those who are caught up in the juvenile justice system is that because they have fallen through all the safety nets that we as a society have created for them. So the first safety net is the family, right? And for some reason, they've struggled in the family. The second safety net is the school. The first institution young people are introduced to institutionally is the school, right? And for some reason, they struggled in school and they fell through that safety net. The third safety net is the community. That's where all those other services, mental health services, youth development services, special education service, the community offers these for kids who need extra attention. And when they fall through those first three safety nets, family, school, and community, the only area that's left for many of them is the juvenile justice system. I'm talking about children. And the system takes them, right? And says, you've made a series of mistakes. We have to find a way to stop that because that's going to affect your future going forward. So now you're in the juvenile justice system. It's kids' prison, right? And it dawned on me that these are, as people would say from using past experiences, the most at risk kids. They've made a series of mistakes. They've struggled in every part of society, and sooner or later, the justice system has to, or the law enforcement system has to scoop them up and find a way to see if we can rehabilitate them. So I began my work in that saying these are still children. Even when you think about the justice system separated from adult and juvenile, the reason it's separated because the juvenile justice system recognizes these are kids who are still developing. There's a lot of things going on in their maturity systems, right? Including brain development that we now know really doesn't mature until about age 25. So we can't treat juveniles like we treat adults. We can't say, oh, this is a bad seed, let's throw them in jail and throw away the key, right? That we need to continue to work with them. So my curiosity led me to working with kids in the juvenile justice system and applying the belief that all kids, including those in the juvenile justice system, are capable of success, no exceptions. But for them to be capable of success, we have to change the culture of the juvenile justice system because it reverted to one of punishment in some degrees, right? We got to show these kids who's the boss and society's the boss and their behavior isn't acceptable. And so I needed to help them change the paradigm. And ultimately, through discussions, workshops, some trainings, the state of Arizona adopted Kids at Hope as their youth development strategy for the entire state, for all the juvenile justice courts, all the juvenile justice detention centers, all the probation, all the applied uh, supervision of these young people. And the foundation of that, remembering who we're talking about, at the foundation of it, the system has to accept the fact that all kids are capable of success, no exceptions. And once they accept that belief system, then our job is to help them create hope in that system and activate hope in that system. And we've seen tremendous changes simply by changing the paradigm of the juvenile justice system from one of punishment and retribution to one of hope and opportunity. And then one, Amy,
Yes.
and I gotta say, and to see these changes taking place, but a number of the juvenile justice centers that I work with in Arizona, particularly, uh, you can now get college credit while you're in detention. You can graduate from high school and actually enroll in college while you're in detention. Talk about preparing these kids for the future. That's how we prepare our young people for the future, by giving them an education that helps them navigate the future. But if you're in detention and jail, lock them up and throw away the key, then when they leave, how are they prepared to contribute to society? So now we begin to understand there's a larger responsibility for the juvenile justice system. And part of that responsibility is that they have to teach these kids how to be hopeful.
There's hope, and then there's the pathway,
Yes,
because the college credits and the support and having a mentor that believes in you, like what a system. So I listened to that. I heard you talk about it a little. I'm glad you gave me more details here. But I heard that at the conference and I went, oh my gosh, what if we had that in schools for kids with disabilities? And people, leaders and teachers tell me, these strategies work for all kids. They don't only work for kids with disabilities. And I go, yes, they're designed, the brain science is about what strategies they need to support them. But all of us have variable learning styles and variable learning approaches, and we need to learn things in different ways. So, oh, I'm so excited about meeting you, forming this relationship with you, learning more from you, and learning alongside you and applying it to a new place. So, if people want to get more information from you, if they want to get in touch with you, or they want to, like, what would they, how would they reach out?
very simply. They can reach me by my email, which is one word, Rick Miller, Rickmiller, Rick Miller at ASU, Arizona State University, but initials ASU.edu. Rick Miller, one word, at ASU.edu.
And I'll put that in the show notes. So if people want to get in touch with you, they can click on that. Um, so I'm so excited. I'm coming to your conference in October. Very excited
You
about
are?
that
Yes.
too. Yes, and I want to, like, this is just the beginning.
Yeah. Can I promote that conference too, and
Sure.
why we hold that? It's the only conference institute, I think, in the world that specifically focuses on hope as the discipline we're going to examine, right? And remember, and your introduction to hope science, my introduction to hope science was curious in its own right because hope is probably one of the greatest gifts given to humankind. We share a lot of behaviors and surviving techniques and biology with lots of species in the world. But the one that humans receive that no other species was given the gift of is hope. And yet, for since the beginning of humankind, we have not really taken a scientific interest in hope. Theology has, philosophy has, even mythology with Pandora's box has, and each of us personally have our own definition of hope. And that's important because we understand there's an energy force that comes along with feeling hopeful that isn't available if you don't feel hopeful. But science didn't take a serious interest in hope until the late 80s, 1980s, early 1990s, and said this dynamic energy force that absolutely distinguishes why some people do well and other people struggle. This dynamic energy force we call hope has never been explored scientifically. And now it's time to do that. And so scientists, the researchers came together, practitioners like myself and you, we're coming together and taking that science and applying it to everyone that needs to be hopeful, because our science now tells us that if you're a hopeful person, and we can measure that, right? We can measure your blood pressure, we can measure your heart rate, right? We can measure lots of things. Now we can measure a sense of hopefulness. If you measure high in hopefulness, these are the benefits that science has identified. One is you're happier, you have better relationships, you achieve more of your goals, you're healthier, and you live longer. Those are benefits of being a hopeful person. If you choose not to be a hopeful person, and lots of people choose not to be hopeful, they're
Oh
happy.
yeah.
I have one friend that was happy in his depression because he knew what depression offered him. He knew he could survive as a depressed individual, but he didn't know the flip side of that coin, from depression to hopefulness. He didn't know the flip side, but he was comfortable surviving even though he knew he was depressed, right? So we, as human beings, understanding the science of hope, now understand hope is not an emotion, it's a cognitive function, and we can choose to be hopeful. And if we choose to be hopeful, those five benefits I just mentioned to you are available. If you choose not to be hopeful, those five benefits aren't available to you.
Yep. And on your recommendation, I have here
Yep.
the Handbook of Hope, and I'm digesting it. It's a little dense in parts, but it is so valuable.
Yep.
Well, I want to keep this short, although I could talk to you all day. So I'll just wrap this up by saying this was myth number 5, the low expectations myth. Let's get rid of that one. Let's just blow that one out of the water and not have low expectations. Let's have high hope for everybody. And
And,
if you
and,
want
and Amy, let's leave it with because we believe all kids are capable of success, no exception. We don't
no
say
exceptions.
some
Yes,
kids, a few kids, but in our case, we believe all kids are capable of success, and there are no exceptions to that rule.
right. And also on my Substack channel, you can learn more about the Joyful Educator mini course, which is built on the Joyful Inclusion Hope framework. The first one is going to go live in August, so stay tuned. And thank you once again, Rick, for being my guest on my podcast.
My honor.
I have hope that a lot of people will watch this.
I trust that they will. It's too important not to.